Hello there, and welcome to our journey back in time. I'm so glad you're joining me tonight, or whenever you're listening, whether you're settling in for sleep, enjoying a quiet break in your day, or just curious about history, you're in for a truly immersive experience. Tonight, we're going to explore what life was really like in the Middle Ages, especially when it came to hygiene, comfort, and everyday cleanliness. Instead of listing facts, we'll move slowly through muddy alleys, smoky homes, and creaky bathhouses, observing textures, scents, routines, and shadows. If you'd like, leave a comment saying where and when you're listening. Now get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin our journey. Picture morning light filtering through thick grey clouds, casting a pale glow over narrow cobblestone streets still slick with overnight rain. The stones glisten unevenly, worn smooth by countless feet and hooves, creating pools of murky water that reflect the overcast sky above. Steam rises gently from these puddles, carrying with it the earthy scent of wet stone and something else, the persistent underlying odor that seems to cling to every medieval settlement. In these early hours, when the air is still cool and heavy with moisture, you can almost taste the dampness on your tongue. The wooden shutters of timber-framed houses creak open slowly, releasing trapped air thick with smoke from hearth fires that burned through the night. These homes lean close together, their upper stories jutting out over the street, creating shadowy channels where the morning light struggles to penetrate. The walls themselves tell stories through their surfaces, rough-hewn timber, darkened with age and smoke, wattle and daub filling the gaps between wooden beams. Some of the plaster has chipped away, revealing the interwoven twigs and dried mud beneath. Moss grows in the crevices where rainwater collects, and the wood grain runs in long, uneven lines, marked by the tools that shaped them centuries ago. Beneath your feet, the cobblestones are not the only surface. Between them, packed earth and organic matter create a softer, yielding texture that your shoes sink into slightly with each step. This mixture of mud, straw, food scraps, and other less pleasant substances forms the living floor of the medieval street. The sensation underfoot is uneven, sometimes firm stone, sometimes squelching softness that releases its own particular fragrances with each footfall. As the morning progresses and the mist begins to lift, the sounds of the settlement awaken, not the sudden cacophony of modern life, but a gradual layering of gentle sounds. The soft splash of water being poured from wooden buckets, the rhythmic scraping of wooden spoons against pottery bowls, the quiet shuffle of bare feet on rush-covered floors. These sounds seem muffled, absorbed by the thick walls and heavy textiles that fill these spaces. The very air itself carries weight and substance in this medieval morning. It's thick with moisture and smoke, creating layers of scent that shift and change with every breeze. Wood smoke from countless hearth fires mingles with the earthy smell of wet thatch roofs, the organic decay of street debris, and the persistent human odors that permeate every medieval settlement. This is air that has substance, that clings to clothing and hair, that seems to coat the inside of your throat with its heavy presence. Through an open doorway, you glimpse the interior of a typical dwelling. The floor is covered with rushes, long dried grasses that carpet the packed earth below. These rushes rustle softly with every movement, releasing their sweet hay-like scent mixed with other aromas that have seeped into them over time. They provide a cushioned surface that yields gently underfoot, though they crackle and compress with each step. The rushes are not uniform in their coverage. In some places, they've been scattered thick and fresh, their green color still visible beneath the brown of age. In others, they've worn thin, revealing the dark earth beneath. Small particles of debris, crumbs, bits of wool, tiny fragments of daily life nestle among the dried grasses, creating texture and depth to what might otherwise seem like simple floor covering. Walking across these rushes creates its own sensory symphony. Your feet sink slightly into the organic layer, feeling the give and spring of dried vegetation. The sound is a gentle whisper with each step, punctuated by the occasional sharper crackle of particularly dry stems. The scent rises with each footfall, sweet grass mixed with earthier notes, and the faint must of organic decay that speaks to weeks or months since the rushes were last changed. Near the hearth, the rushes have been cleared away entirely, leaving a circle of packed earth, darkened by countless dropped embers and the weight of heavy iron implements. The hearth itself radiates a gentle warmth that you can feel on your face even from several feet away. The stones that surround the fire are blackened with soot, their surfaces smooth from years of heat and handling. When you run your fingers along them, they leave a fine dark residue that speaks of countless fires and endless meals prepared in this same spot. The warmth from the hearth creates its own microclimate in the room. Near the fire, the air shimmers slightly with heat, creating almost imperceptible movements that catch the eye. The stones radiate warmth that you can feel on your skin from several feet away, and the iron implements, pots, spits, fire tools retain and radiate their own heat, creating warm zones throughout the hearth area. The walls around the hearth are similarly darkened, the smoke having stained the wattle and daub a deep amber color that catches the firelight and reflects it back in warm golden tones. This coloration isn't uniform, it creates patterns and variations that shift as the flames dance, making the walls seem almost alive in their gentle movement of light and shadow. Above, rough wooden beams support the structure, their surfaces worn smooth by time and darkened by smoke. These beams are substantial, hand-hewn from entire tree trunks, and their natural curves and imperfections create interesting shadows and visual textures. Small items hang from iron hooks driven into the wood, bundles of dried herbs, strings of onions, strips of cloth, cooking implements. They sway gently in the warm air rising from the fire, creating subtle movements that catch the eye without demanding attention. The ceiling itself, formed by the underside of the floor above or by rough planking, bears the same smoke stains as the walls. The wood has taken on a rich, deep color from years of exposure to hearth smoke, creating a surface that seems to absorb and reflect light in equal measure. Cobwebs gather in the corners where the irregular beams meet, catching particles of ash and dust that float in the warm air currents. The scent here is complex and layering. The smoke from the hearth carries hints of the wood being burned, oak perhaps, with its sweet, clean fragrance, or pine with its sharper, resinous notes. Mixed with this are the aromas of cooking, the earthy smell of root vegetables, the rich scent of porridge or pottage simmering slowly in iron pots. There's also the smell of the rushes underfoot, and beneath it all, the persistent odor of bodies and clothing that rarely see soap and water. But let's pause here by the hearth and truly absorb this medieval sensory experience. The fire pops and crackles, sending up sparks that rise in the warm air before dying out. These sparks create tiny points of light that draw the eye upward, following their brief journey toward the smoke-darkened ceiling. The flames themselves dance in patterns that seem almost hypnotic, sometimes leaping high with fresh fuel, sometimes settling into steady tongues of orange and blue that lick at the burning wood. The iron pot, suspended over the fire, contains the day's meal, perhaps a thick pottage of grains and vegetables, or a simple broth made from bones and whatever vegetables could be found. The contents bubble gently, creating soft, rhythmic sounds and releasing steam that carries its own aromatic messages. This steam mingles with the smoke from the fire, creating layers of scent that shift and change as the wind moves through the room. Around the hearth area, the medieval kitchen reveals itself in all its primitive functionality. Wooden bowls, carved from single blocks of wood, bear the marks of countless meals and washings. Their surfaces are smooth from use, but retain the grain patterns of their original trees. When you pick one up, it feels substantial and warm, shaped to fit comfortably in hands that knew no other dining implements. Clay pottery sits on rough wooden shelves, or directly on the earthen floor. These vessels are thick-walled and irregularly shaped, their surfaces bearing the fingerprints of their makers and the scorch marks of hearth use. Some are glazed with simple lead glazes that create mottled, uneven finishes in greens and browns. Others are left in their natural clay state, their porous surfaces darkened by use and stained with the residues of countless meals. The wooden spoons and ladles that hang near the hearth are carved from single pieces of wood, their bowls worn smooth by constant use. Each one is slightly different, shaped by individual hands rather than machines, creating utensils that feel personal and unique. The wood has absorbed oils and moisture from years of use, giving it a deeper color and a smooth, almost silky texture. As we move away from the hearth and deeper into this medieval dwelling, other sensory experiences reveal themselves. The single room that serves as both living and sleeping space contains furniture that speaks to a world where everything served multiple purposes. A large wooden chest, bound with iron straps and secured with a heavy lock, serves as both storage and seating. Its surface is rough and unfinished, marked with the scars of daily use, scratches, dents, water stains that speak to years of service. The chest's iron fittings have developed a patina of rust that leaves reddish stains on the wood around them. When you run your hand along these metal elements, they feel rough and slightly flaky, with edges softened by corrosion. The lock itself is a substantial piece of ironwork, heavy and cold to the touch, its mechanism rough and requiring significant force to operate. Inside the chest, the medieval world of textiles reveals itself. Woolen garments folded and stored here carry their own complex aromas. The lanolin of sheep's wool, mixed with the herbs used to deter insects, the faint mustiness of long storage, and the deeper sense of human wear that no amount of medieval cleaning could completely eliminate. These fabrics feel substantial and slightly rough, their weaves irregular and their surfaces bearing the marks of hand production. Linen, when present, provides a contrast to the wool, smoother but still coarse by modern standards. These linen pieces have been washed and rewashed until they've achieved a softness that speaks to years of use. They smell cleaner than the wool, but still carry their own subtle mustiness and the faint chemical scent of the harsh soaps used to clean them. The colors of these stored textiles tell their own story of medieval dyeing techniques. Deep browns and grays dominate, colors achieved with readily available materials like oak bark and iron. Occasionally, a flash of more vibrant color appears. A piece dyed with expensive imported materials or local plants that produce reds, blues, or yellows. These colors are never uniform or bright as modern dyes would create, but rather show the subtle variations and irregularities that speak to hand-dyeing processes. As the morning progresses and we venture outside again, the medieval settlement reveals more of its sensory complexity. The narrow streets between buildings create their own acoustic environment. Sounds bounce off the closed walls, creating echoes and reverberations that amplify some noises while muffling others. Footsteps on cobblestones ring out clearly, while voices seem to carry and blend, creating a constant murmur of human activity. The air circulation in these narrow passages creates its own patterns of scent and temperature. Cool, damp air pools in the shadows between buildings, carrying with it the concentrated odors of close human habitation. Smoke from hearth fires swirls and eddies between the structures, sometimes creating pockets of clear air, other times concentrating the smoke until it stings the eyes and catches in the throat. The buildings themselves seem to lean inward, their upper stories jutting out over the streets below. This creates a sense of enclosure and intimacy that's both comforting and claustrophobic. The overhangs provide some protection from rain, but they also trap moisture and odors, creating microclimates that vary dramatically within just a few steps. Water runs down from the thatched roofs in irregular streams during and after rain, creating temporary waterfalls and streams that carry with them debris from the roofing materials. This water is often discolored brown from thatch, green from moss, carrying particles of straw and organic matter that speak to the living nature of these roof systems. The thatch itself deserves close attention for its unique sensory qualities. Made from layers of straw, reeds, or other organic materials, it creates roofing that's alive in its own way. Birds nest in its layers, insects make their homes in its depths, and small plants sometimes take root in the accumulated organic matter. The result is roofing that changes with the seasons, that smells and sounds different as weather and time affect its composition. When rain falls on thatch, it creates a sound unlike any modern roofing material, a soft, whispered patter that builds to a rushing whisper as water finds its paths through the organic layers. The smell of wet thatch is distinctive, earthy and organic, with hints of decay and the green scents of growing things. Steam rises from thatch roofs after rain, carrying these scents upward and distributing them throughout the settlement. As the day progresses and we move deeper into the settlement, the character of the scents and textures changes. Near what might generously be called the sanitation areas, the olfactory experience becomes more challenging. Here, behind houses and in narrow alleyways, the medieval approach to waste management reveals itself. in ways that assault modern sensibilities, but would have been simply part of daily reality for these inhabitants. The medieval approach to sanitation creates its own landscape of scents and textures. Open ditches carry away liquid waste, their contents flowing slowly towards streams or rivers that serve the dual purpose of waste removal and water supply. These ditches are lined with stones or simply carved into the earth, their sides slick with organic residues and populated by insects and other small creatures that find sustenance in the flowing waste. The sound of these waste channels is a constant, quiet gurgle, water moving slowly over irregular surfaces, carrying with it the detritus of daily life. This sound becomes part of the background audio of medieval settlements, a constant reminder of the proximity between human habitation and its necessary but unpleasant byproducts. Wooden privies, simple structures built over pits or extending over streams, create their own microenvironments of scent and sound. The wood of these structures is often rough and unpainted, weathered to a silvery grey by rain and sun. When you place your hand on these surfaces, they feel dry and splintery, worn smooth in some places by countless hands but retaining their rough texture in others. The interiors of these spaces are dim and close, with small openings that let in minimal light. The walls are close enough that you can touch both sides with outstretched arms, creating an intimate, enclosed feeling that some might find comforting and others claustrophobic. The floor, usually made of wooden planks with gaps between them, creaks and shifts slightly underfoot, while the seat itself, a simple board with a circular opening, bears the marks of long use. The acoustic properties of these small spaces amplify sounds, creating an environment where every movement, every breath, seems magnified. The wooden walls and floor absorb some sounds while reflecting others, creating a unique audio signature that speaks to the basic human necessity that these structures serve. Moving away from these necessary but unpleasant areas, we find ourselves in spaces devoted to what cleaning did occur in medieval times, near streams or wells. Washerwomen work with wooden paddles and rough lye soap, their hands red from the caustic mixture and the cold water. The soap itself is unlike anything modern, harsh and grainy, made from wood ash and animal fats, with a texture that's more like coarse sand than the smooth bars we know today. The process of making this medieval soap creates its own sensory experience. Wood ash, typically from hardwood fires, is leached with water to create lye, a caustic solution that burns the skin and has a sharp chemical smell. This lye is then mixed with rendered animal fats, creating a chemical reaction that produces soap. The result is a harsh alkaline substance that cleans through chemical action rather than the gentle surfactants of modern soaps. When dissolved in water, this soap creates a slippery, alkaline solution that makes the water feel almost oily between your fingers. It doesn't produce luxurious bubbles, but rather a thin, greyish foam that clings to surfaces and leaves them feeling slightly rough and dried. The scent is not pleasant, a sharp chemical smell mixed with the organic odors of the fats used in its creation. The wooden washing tubs are substantial pieces of craftsmanship, their staves bound with iron hoops that have rusted to a deep reddish brown. The wood has been darkened by countless washings, stained with minerals from well water and the residue of soaps and detergents. When filled, these tubs creak slightly under the weight of water and the pressure of vigorous scrubbing. These tubs are often placed near streams or wells, creating washing areas that become social centers where washerwomen gather to share news and gossip while working. The sound of their paddles against wet cloth creates a rhythmic backdrop to their conversations, a steady, damp percussion that speaks to the physical labor required for even basic cleanliness. The washerwomen's tools are simple but effective, wooden paddles worn smooth by use, their surfaces bearing the marks of countless beatings against wet cloth. These paddles have a satisfying weight in the hand, substantial enough to deliver force but balanced for long periods of use. The sound they make against wet cloth is rhythmic and oddly soothing, a soft, damp slapping that echoes off nearby walls and mingles with the splash and gurgle of water. The technique of medieval washing involves far more physical effort than modern laundering. Clothes are soaked in the harsh lye solution, then beaten against rocks or wooden surfaces to drive out dirt and oils. This beating creates its own sounds. The sharp crack of paddle against stone, the softer thump of fabric against wood, the splash of water displaced by vigorous scrubbing. The clothing being washed tells its own story through texture and scent. Woolen garments, heavy with lanolin and the accumulated oils of daily wear, release their own particular aroma when wet, earthy and animal-like, but not entirely unpleasant. When these garments absorb water, they become incredibly heavy, requiring significant strength to lift and manipulate during the washing process. Linen, when available, has a cleaner scent, though even this carries the mustiness of long storage and infrequent washing. Wet linen has its own unique texture, smooth when new, increasingly soft with age and repeated washing, but always maintaining a substantial feel that speaks to the quality of the fibers and the skill of the weavers who created it. These fabrics have textures quite different from modern textiles. The wool is coarse and slightly scratchy, woven loosely enough that you can see the individual threads and sometimes even pull them slightly apart. When wet, it becomes heavy and dense, clinging to itself and holding water in its fibers like a sponge. The individual fibers are visible to the naked eye, creating a fabric that looks and feels handmade in every thread. The linen, while smoother, still has irregularities in its weave, thicker threads here and there, occasional knots or repairs that create bumps and variations in the surface. These irregularities aren't flaws, but rather evidence of the hand processes that created the fabric, making each piece unique and giving it character that mass-produced textiles never achieve. The drying of these washed garments creates its own sensory experiences. Hung on wooden frames or spread over bushes and rocks, wet clothing steams in the sun, releasing the sense of soap and clean water mingled with the natural aromas of the fabrics themselves. The sound of water dripping from drying clothes creates a gentle percussion against stone and earth, while the movement of hanging garments in the breeze adds visual interest to the medieval landscape. As afternoon settles into the settlement, we move toward areas where bathing, that rarest of medieval activities, might actually occur. Public bathhouses, where they exist, are dim, steamy environments filled with their own particular sensory experiences. The air here is thick with moisture, making it feel heavy and almost chewy as you breathe. This humidity carries scents more intensely, creating a complex bouquet of human bodies, harsh soap, wet wood, and the mineral smell of heated water. The entrance to a medieval bathhouse is often through a heavy wooden door that swells with moisture, requiring effort to open and close. The door itself is darkened with water stains and bears the marks of countless hands, smooth patches where palms have pushed, scratches and gouges from daily use. The iron hinges creak and groan under the weight and moisture, creating sounds that announce each arrival and departure. Inside, the atmosphere is immediately different from the outside world. The air is warm and humid, creating an envelope of moisture that clings to skin and clothing. Breathing this air requires adjustment. It's thicker than normal air, carrying more moisture and concentrated scents that can be overwhelming at first exposure. The floors of these bathhouses are typically stone or hard-packed earth, slick with condensation and the overflow from wooden tubs. Your feet slide slightly with each step, and the surface feels cool and damp even in the warm, humid air. The sensation underfoot is treacherous, smooth stone made slippery by constant moisture, requiring careful placement of each step to avoid slipping. The walls weep with condensation, creating trails of moisture that catch the dim light from oil lamps or candles placed in wall niches. These moisture trails are constantly moving, creating patterns that shift and change as you watch. The condensation carries with it dissolved minerals and organic matter, leaving stains and deposits that create texture and color variations on the wall surfaces. The lighting in bathhouses is necessarily dim. Oil lamps and candles struggle against the humid atmosphere, their flames often flickering and sometimes guttering out entirely. This creates an environment where vision is limited, making other senses more important. The sound of dripping water becomes more noticeable, the scents more concentrated, the textures more immediate and important for navigation. The bathing tubs themselves are remarkable pieces of medieval engineering. Large wooden vessels, sometimes lined with linen cloths to prevent splinters, capable of holding enough hot water for one or possibly two people. The wood has been swollen by constant moisture, the grain raised and rough, dark with water stains and the residue of countless bathers. These tubs are often made from oak or other hardwoods chosen for their ability to withstand constant moisture. The staves are thick and substantial, bound with iron hoops that have blackened with age and moisture. The joints between staves weep slightly, creating constant small streams of water that pool on the floor around each tub. The process of filling these tubs requires significant effort and coordination. Water must be heated in large iron cauldrons over open fires, then transported in smaller vessels to fill the bathing tubs. This heated water carries with it the taste and smell of iron from the cauldrons, plus smoke from the fires used to heat it. The water is never perfectly clean. It contains sediment from wells, minerals dissolved from heating vessels, and particles of ash and debris from the heating process. When filled with hot water, these tubs create their own small climate. The water itself is rarely clear, clouded with soap residue, minerals from wells, and the inevitable evidence of previous users. The temperature is uneven, hot near where the heated water was poured in, cooler at the edges and bottom. Steam rises from the surface, creating localized clouds of vapor that shift and move with air currents. When you lower yourself into such a tub, the water embraces you with its warmth, but the wooden sides are rough against your skin, and the bottom may be gritty with sediment. The water level changes dramatically with the addition of a human body, often overflowing onto the already wet floors. The sensation is both luxurious and primitive. The heat is wonderful, but everything else speaks to a technology and approach far removed from modern bathing. The experience of medieval bathing is so different from modern expectations that it becomes almost meditative in its strangeness. The water, heated in iron cauldrons over open fires, carries with it the taste of metal and smoke. Small particles float on the surface, bits of ash, perhaps, or debris from the heating process. The soap creates more of a film than a cleansing lather, leaving the skin feeling tight and slightly irritated. But there's something deeply satisfying about the warmth in these cold, damp environments. The heat seems to penetrate more deeply when the surrounding air is cool and humid, creating a contrast that makes the warm water feel like a luxury beyond measure. Steam rises from the water's surface, creating shifting patterns in the dim light and adding to the dreamlike quality of the experience. The social aspects of bathhouse use create their own sensory elements. Voices echo in the humid air, creating sound patterns different from normal conversation. Words seem muffled and changed by the moisture-laden atmosphere, while the constant background sounds of dripping water, lapping waves from occupied tubs, and the hiss of steam create an audio landscape unique to these environments. Other bathers create their own sensory contributions. The splash of water as bodies move in tubs, the scraping of wooden stools and benches across wet floors, the soft slap of bare feet on slick surfaces. These human sounds blend with the environmental audio to create a complex symphony of bathing that speaks to shared necessity and communal hygiene practices. As evening approaches, and we prepare to explore the sleeping arrangements of medieval life, the character of our environment shifts once again. The hearth fires that have burned all day are built up for the night, their flames casting longer shadows and creating pools of warm light that barely reach the corners of rooms. The transition from day to night in medieval dwellings is gradual and ritualistic. Shutters are closed against the night air, their wooden surfaces creating barriers against both weather and the unknown dangers of darkness. These shutters fit imperfectly against their frames, leaving gaps that allow small drafts and slivers of outside light to penetrate the interior spaces. The process of closing shutters creates its own sensory experience. The wood creaks and groans as it moves. The hinges protest with metallic squeaks and groans, and the final closing creates a definitive change in the acoustic properties of the interior space. Outside sounds become muffled while interior sounds are reflected and contained, creating a more intimate audio environment. Oil lamps and candles are lit to provide light for evening activities. These flames create their own sensory signatures. Oil lamps burn with a steady, slightly fishy smell, while tallow candles produce their own aromatic fingerprint of rendered animal fat. The light they provide is golden and warm but limited in reach, creating pools of visibility surrounded by areas of deep shadow. The smoke from these lighting sources adds another layer to the already complex, aromatic environment of medieval dwellings. This smoke is different from hearth smoke, lighter, more acrid, carrying the specific sense of burning oils or fats. It tends to rise and collect near ceilings, creating layers of scent that change as you move vertically through the space. In bed chambers, such as they are, the furniture is simple and functional. Wooden bed frames, if they exist at all, are rough-hewn affairs, more concerned with structure than comfort. The wood is usually left unfinished, showing the marks of the tools that shaped it and bearing the stains and wear patterns of long use. These bed frames creak and shift under weight, their joints loosened by age and the expansion and contraction caused by changes in humidity. The sounds they make are distinctive, wooden groans and squeaks that announce every movement of their occupants. The frames themselves are often substantial enough to serve other purposes, incorporating storage spaces or additional seating into their basic sleeping function. The mattresses are unlike anything modern. Large linen bags stuffed with straw, feathers, or other organic materials that create uneven, shifting surfaces that conform to the body in unpredictable ways. These mattresses are substantial investments, representing significant amounts of labor and materials, and they're designed to last for years or even decades of use. The straw-filled mattresses rustle and crackle with every movement, settling and reshaping themselves as you shift position. The straw pokes through the linen covering in places, creating small, sharp reminders of the organic nature of the bedding. When fresh, such bedding has the sweet scent of dried grasses, but over time it takes on other aromas, the oils and scents of human bodies, plus whatever small creatures might make their homes in the organic matter. The process of preparing these beds for sleep involves fluffing and redistributing the filling materials, creating temporary areas of greater and lesser support. This preparation is both practical and ritualistic, marking the transition from day to night and creating the most comfortable sleeping surface possible within the limitations of medieval technology. Feather beds, when available, offer a different sensory experience entirely. The feathers create a softer, more yielding surface, but one that shifts and moves unpredictably. They also retain heat differently, sometimes becoming warm and stuffy, other times developing cool spots where the feathers have shifted away. The sound is different too, less crackling, more of a soft whisper as the feathers move against each other. The quality of feathers makes a significant difference in the sleeping experience. Down from waterfowl creates the softest, most comfortable beds, but such luxury is rare and expensive. More common are beds stuffed with chicken feathers or the coarser feathers of other domestic birds. These create beds that are softer than straw, but still maintain their own organic character and irregularities. The bed coverings tell their own story of medieval textile production and daily life. Woolen blankets, heavy and slightly scratchy, provide warmth but also weight that modern sleepers might find oppressive. These blankets often show their homemade origins in their irregular weave and the variations in thickness throughout the fabric. Some areas are tighter and warmer, others looser and more drafty, creating a patchwork of thermal experiences across the sleeping surface. The weight of these woolen coverings is substantial, much heavier than modern blankets, creating a sense of security and warmth, but also potential oppression for those accustomed to lighter bedding. The weight distribution is uneven, with some areas thicker and heavier than others, creating pressure points and variations that sleeping bodies must accommodate. Linen sheets, where they exist, have been washed so many times that they've achieved a soft, almost silky texture, though they remain somewhat coarse by modern standards. These sheets often bear the evidence of their long use, patches where holes have been mended, areas worn thin by countless nights of sleep, stains that no amount of medieval laundering could completely remove. The mending and repair work visible on these linens tells stories of economy and necessity. Patches are sewn with careful stitches, creating texture variations where repair meets original fabric. These patches often use different weights or colors of linen, creating a patchwork effect that speaks to the precious nature of good quality fabric. The pillows deserve special attention for their unique medieval character. Stuffed with feathers, down, or even dried herbs, they create support that's both soft and lumpy, conforming to the head and neck in ways that are both comfortable and strange. The herb-filled pillows release their scents throughout the night, lavender, chamomile, or other aromatics that were believed to promote good sleep and ward off illness. These pillows are often smaller than modern versions, designed more to support the neck than cradle the entire head. Their irregular shapes conform to use patterns, creating depressions and high spots that reflect the sleeping positions of their regular users. The pillowcases, when they exist, are made from the same rough linens as sheets, creating texture against the face that's both familiar and slightly abrasive. The process of settling into medieval bedding is a sensory adventure in itself. The mattress shifts and settles under your weight, creating new contours and revealing the uneven distribution of filling materials. The covers are heavy and substantial, requiring effort to arrange properly for warmth and comfort. The pillows must be adjusted and fluffed, their irregular shapes requiring conscious positioning for comfort. As night fully settles over our medieval environment, the sensory experience shifts toward the subtle and the quiet. The day's activities wind down, leaving behind their accumulated scents and textures as evidence of a world where cleanliness was a luxury and comfort was measured by different standards than our own. The shutters close with creaks and groans, their wooden surfaces still warm from the day's sun, but beginning to cool as night air circulates around them. These shutters fit imperfectly, leaving gaps that allow small drafts to enter, carrying with them the sense of the outdoor world, night-blooming flowers, if the season is right, the dampness of dew beginning to form, the smoky residue of dying hearth fires from other dwellings. The night air that enters through these gaps is different from day air, cooler, more still, carrying different scents and moisture levels. This air moves through the interior spaces in gentle currents, creating subtle temperature variations and carrying scents from one area to another. The movement of this air is almost imperceptible but constant, creating a living quality to the indoor atmosphere. Inside, the last light comes from oil lamps or tallow candles, their flames creating dancing shadows on the walls and filling the air with their own distinctive scents. Oil lamps burn with a steady, slightly fishy smell, while tallow candles create their own aromatic signature of rendered animal fat. Neither provides the clean, bright light of modern illumination, but rather a golden, flickering glow that seems to make surfaces appear softer and more mysterious. The interplay of light and shadow in these dimly lit spaces creates constantly changing visual textures on walls and ceilings. The rough surfaces of medieval construction catch and hold shadows in their irregularities, creating depth and movement that changes with every flicker of flame. These moving shadows become part of the visual environment, creating a sense of life and movement even in still spaces. The dying fire in the hearth settles into glowing coals, their red heat still radiating warmth into the room but no longer providing significant light. The wooden logs crackle occasionally as they split and settle, releasing little puffs of smoke and spark that briefly brighten before fading back to red embers. The smell of this dying fire is comforting, wood smoke mixed with the mineral scent of ash and the faint sweetness of sap that still resides in the burning timber. The transition from flame to coals creates its own progression of scents and sounds. Active flames produce one type of smoke, while smoldering coals create another, deeper, more concentrated, with less visible smoke, but more intense aromatic compounds. The sounds change too, from the active crackling of burning wood to the subtler settling and occasional hiss of glowing coals. In this low light, the textures of the medieval world become more pronounced through touch than sight. The wooden surfaces feel rougher, their grain more apparent under fingertips. The woolen fabrics seem thicker and more substantial, their imperfections more noticeable as hands explore their surfaces seeking comfort and warmth. The rush floors rustle more audibly in the quiet, creating a constant, gentle backdrop of organic sound. The night sounds of the medieval settlement create their own acoustic landscape. Without the constant hum of modern machinery, every natural sound becomes more apparent. The soft whisper of wind through thatch roofs creates a gentle rhythmic breathing that rises and falls with the breeze. The occasional creak of wooden shutters or the settling of timber frames punctuates the quieter background sounds. Water continues its movement through the settlement. Even in the darkness, the quiet gurgle of waste channels, the drip of moisture from eaves and overhangs, the distant splash of someone drawing water from a well. These water sounds create a liquid percussion that underscores all other night sounds, reminding listeners of the constant presence of moisture in this medieval world. The air itself has settled into its nighttime character, cooler, more still, thick with the accumulated scents and moisture of the day. Breathing this air is like tasting history. The smoke, the organic matter, the human presence, all blended into an atmosphere that speaks of lives lived close to the earth and far from modern conveniences. The cooling air creates its own movements and currents within the enclosed spaces of medieval dwellings. Warm air rises from dying fires and human bodies, while cooler air seeps in through gaps and openings, creating gentle circulation patterns that carry scents and moisture throughout the interior spaces. These air movements are subtle but constant, creating a living quality to the indoor atmosphere that changes throughout the night. Animal sounds drift through the settlement as domestic creatures settle for the night. Pigs grunt and shuffle in their pens, their movements creating soft sounds of straw and earth being disturbed. Chickens cluck quietly as they roost, their feathers rustling as they settle on wooden perches. A distant cow lows softly, the sound carrying through the still air and echoing off the walls of nearby buildings. These animal sounds are not intrusions but integral parts of the medieval soundscape. Domestic animals live in close proximity to their human caretakers, often sharing the same buildings or occupying adjacent spaces. Their presence creates a constant, gentle reminder of the agricultural basis of medieval life and the interdependence between humans and animals. Cats move silently through the darkness, their presence detected more by the brief silence of mice and rats than by any sound they make themselves. These feline hunters create their own subtle influence on the nighttime environment. Small rustlings cease as they pass. Prey animals become still and quiet, leaving temporary pockets of unusual silence in their wake. The human sounds of night are different from those of day. Voices become softer, more intimate, as families settle into their evening routines. The hard consonants and bright vowels of daytime conversation give way to gentler murmurs, whispered conversations, and the soft sounds of domestic activities being completed by lamplight and firelight. Bedtime preparations create their own symphony of sounds. The rustle of clothing being removed and folded, the creak of wooden chests being opened and closed, the soft thud of shoes being placed on earthen floors. Wooden combs pass through hair with gentle scraping sounds, while pottery vessels clink softly as they're arranged for morning use. The process of banking fires for the night creates its own sensory ritual. Wood is carefully arranged to provide heat through the night without creating dangerous flames. Ashes are spread over coals to control their burning, creating soft whooshing sounds and releasing clouds of fine dust that carry the mineral scent of burned wood. The fire settles into a steady, low burn that will maintain minimal heat until morning. Prayer and quiet conversation fill the evening air in many households. These voices create a gentle murmur that blends with other nighttime sounds, not loud enough to disturb, but present enough to create a sense of human community and shared experience. The rhythm of prayers or quiet stories creates its own cadence that becomes part of the nighttime audio landscape. Chamber pots are quietly retrieved from their storage places, their ceramic surfaces cool to the touch, and their contents creating small splashing sounds that are quickly muffled. These necessary implements, while hardly pleasant by modern standards, were crucial elements of nighttime comfort, eliminating the need to venture outside into cold, dark, and potentially dangerous nighttime environments. The ceramic surfaces of these vessels are often rough and unglazed on their exteriors, while their interiors may have simple lead glazes that create smooth, if irregularly colored surfaces. The weight and balance of these pots speak to their practical design, substantial enough to be stable, shaped for easy use, with handles positioned for comfortable carrying. In bed chambers throughout the settlement, the final preparations for sleep create their own sensory experiences. Heavy woolen curtains are drawn around bed areas, creating enclosed spaces within rooms that provide additional warmth and privacy. These curtains are thick enough to block drafts and reduce light, but their rough texture and weighty presence create their own tactile environment. The fabric of these bed curtains carries its own scents, the lanolin of sheep's wool, mixed with the accumulated aromas of years of use. When drawn close, they create an intimate enclosure that concentrates body heat and breath, creating a micro-environment that's warmer and more humid than the surrounding room. Inside these enclosed sleeping areas, the sensory experience becomes even more intimate and immediate. The sounds of the outside world become muffled and distant, while the sounds of breathing and movement become amplified. The warm air trapped within the curtained area carries concentrated scents of bedding, bodies, and the herbal sachets often placed among bed linens. The mattresses settle under sleeping bodies, their organic filling materials compressing and redistributing with each movement. Straw mattresses create small crackling sounds with every shift of position, while feather beds respond with softer whispers as the feathers move and settle. These sounds become part of the rhythm of sleep, marking the transitions between wakefulness and dreams. Linen sheets, where they exist, feel smooth against skin, but retain their slightly rough texture that speaks to hand weaving and harsh washing processes. These fabrics warm quickly from body heat, creating pockets of warmth that contrast with cooler areas where covers have shifted or bodies haven't yet warmed the cloth. The woolen blankets add their own weight and texture to the sleeping experience. Their surface fibers catch and pull slightly against skin and nightclothes, creating tactile sensations that are both protective and slightly irritating. The weight of these coverings creates a sense of security and warmth, but also requires physical effort to shift and rearrange during the night. Pillows stuffed with herbs release their aromas more strongly when warmed by sleeping heads. Lavender creates a sweet floral scent that's believed to promote peaceful sleep, while chamomile adds its own gentle apple-like fragrance. These herbal scents mix with the other aromas of bedding and sleeping bodies, creating olfactory experiences that change and develop throughout the night. The herb-filled pillows also create their own textural experiences. The dried plant materials shift and crackle softly with movement, while their irregular shapes require conscious positioning for comfort. Some herbs, like lavender, retain some of their original structure, creating small lumps and irregularities that sleeping heads must accommodate. As sleep finally claims the inhabitants of this medieval world, the sensory experiences don't cease but rather shift into the background patterns that will persist through the night. The gentle sounds of settling structures, the whisper of wind through thatch, the distant movement of animals all blend into the audio backdrop of medieval sleep. The scents, too, settle into their nighttime patterns. The sharp daytime odors soften and blend, becoming background rather than foreground experiences. The smoke from dying fires mingles with the organic scents of straw and rushes, the woolly smell of blankets, the faint herbal fragrances from pillows and strewing herbs scattered on floors. Breathing becomes deeper and slower, and with it, the intake of these concentrated medieval aromas. The thick, moisture-laden air carries its full complement of scents directly to sleeping inhabitants, creating olfactory experiences that continue even in unconsciousness. These scents become associated with comfort, safety, and home, despite their harshness by modern standards. The temperature within sleeping areas continues to fluctuate throughout the night. Body heat warms the enclosed spaces within bed curtains, while the larger rooms cool as fires die down to coals. This creates temperature gradients that change as the night progresses, requiring sleepers to adjust coverings and positions to maintain comfort. The moisture content of the air also changes through the night. Human respiration adds humidity to enclosed sleeping areas, while the cooling air outside reduces its ability to hold moisture, sometimes creating condensation on cold surfaces. This changing humidity affects how scents are carried and concentrated, creating subtle variations in the olfactory environment throughout the night. Outside sounds continue to filter through the imperfect ceiling of medieval buildings. The night watch calls out the hours, their voices carrying across the settlement and providing temporal anchors for those who wake briefly during the night. These calls are both comforting and practical, marking the passage of safe time and providing security to sleeping inhabitants. Rain, when it falls, creates its own nighttime symphony. The patter on thatch roofs builds from individual drops to rushing streams as water finds its path through the organic roofing materials. The sound of rain on different surfaces creates a complex percussion, sharp on wooden shutters, soft on earth streets, musical on pottery vessels left outside. The rain also changes the scent environment dramatically. Wet thatch releases its own distinctive aroma, while rain on earth creates the rich petrichor scent that speaks of renewal and growth. Water flowing through settlement drainage carries its own bouquet of dissolved organic matter, creating streams of scent that flow with the liquid waste. Wind creates its own audio and olfactory signatures during the night. Gentle breezes whisper through gaps in construction, creating soft whistling sounds and carrying scents from different areas of the settlement. Stronger winds cause shutters to rattle against their frames and create groaning sounds as buildings flex and settle under the pressure. These wind-carried scents create a constantly changing olfactory landscape throughout the night. The smoke from various fires mingles and separates with air currents, while organic odors from waste areas, animal pens, and food preparation spaces blend and concentrate in different patterns as the wind changes direction and intensity. The darkness itself becomes a sensory experience in the medieval world. Without artificial lighting, night brings true darkness, broken only by the occasional flicker of flame or glow of coals. This darkness is not empty, but full of the other senses. Sounds become more important, scents more noticeable, textures more immediate, and crucial for navigation. Moving through medieval spaces in darkness requires different sensory skills. Hands become primary navigation tools, feeling along wall surfaces, testing floor stability, identifying objects through touch alone. The texture of rough wooden walls, the give of earthen floors, the rustle of floor rushes all become important information for safe movement. The quality of medieval darkness is also different from modern experience. Without light pollution, the darkness is deeper and more complete, but it's also more varied. Moonlight and starlight, when not blocked by clouds, provide gentle illumination that creates subtle shadows and highlights. The glow from banked fires creates warm pools of minimal light that barely extend beyond the hearth area. This interplay of darkness and minimal light creates visual textures that shift and change throughout the night. Embers pulse with their own rhythm, creating gentle variations in the red glow that radiates from hearth areas. The minimal light catches on smoke particles, creating visible streams and clouds that mark air currents and temperature differences. As the deepest part of night settles over the medieval settlement, the sensory experience reaches its most concentrated and intimate form. All the accumulated scents, sounds, textures, and thermal experiences of medieval life compress into the immediate environment of sleeping spaces, creating sensory memories that will persist through dreams and into waking consciousness. The human body adapts to these medieval sleeping conditions, learning to find comfort in rough textures and irregular surfaces. Sleep comes despite the scratchy wool, the lumpy mattresses, and the constant subtle sounds of settling structures and moving air. The body temperature adjusts to the thermal patterns of medieval bedding, finding warmth where it can, and accommodating the cool spots where covers shift or fires die down. The breathing of sleeping inhabitants adds its own rhythm to the nighttime audio landscape. Deep, slow breaths create gentle rhythms that blend with other settling sounds. Occasional snores or sleep movements add their own punctuation to the quiet symphony of medieval sleep. These human sounds become part of the communal experience of rest, reminding all inhabitants of their shared humanity and mutual dependence. The dreams that come in this medieval sleep environment carry their own sensory content, informed by the immediate physical experiences of rough textures, organic scents, and the constant subtle sounds of a world lived close to nature. Sleep provides rest, but doesn't separate consciousness entirely from the sensory richness of medieval life. Morning will eventually come, bringing with it the gradual return of daylight through gaps in shutters and the rekindling of fires for warmth and cooking. The cycle of medieval hygiene and daily life will begin again, with all its challenges and small comforts. But for now, in the deep quiet of medieval night, the settlement rests in the accumulated sensory richness of a world so different from our own, yet fundamentally familiar in its basic human needs and simple pleasures. The night watch continues their rounds, their footsteps soft on wet cobblestones, their presence a comfort to sleeping inhabitants. Their lanterns create small pools of moving light that briefly illuminate patches of medieval reality. Stone walls darkened with age, wooden doors swollen with moisture, the gentle steam rising from thatch roofs as night air meets the warmth trapped in organic roofing materials. And so our journey through medieval hygiene and daily comfort draws to a close, not with dramatic conclusion, but with the gentle settling of a world into rest. The textures remain: rough wood, scratchy wool, organic floors. The scents persist: smoke and earth, wool and rushes. The persistent human odors that spoke to a different relationship with cleanliness. The sounds continue: the whisper of wind, the settling of structures, the gentle sounds of sleeping life. In this final quieting, we find ourselves witnesses to a world where every sensory experience was immediate and unfiltered, where comfort was earned through physical effort and found in simple warmth and shelter. The rough wooden surfaces, the scratchy woolen textiles, the organic floors and primitive washing facilities all speak to a time when life was lived closer to its physical realities, when the boundary between human comfort and natural environment was thin and permeable. The last conscious sensations of this medieval day might be the settling of straw bedding as bodies find their sleeping positions, the final crackle of embers in the hearth, the soft rustle of woolen covers being pulled up against the night's chill. These textures and sounds create their own lullaby, not the smooth, controlled comfort of modern sleeping, but something more primal and immediate, where every sense remained engaged with the physical world even as consciousness faded into sleep. The medieval night embraces all within its sensory richness: the smoke-darkened rafters, the herb-scented pillows, the rough linen sheets warmed by sleeping bodies. The hearth glows softly in the darkness, the dried herbs release their quiet fragrances, and the medieval world settles into the peaceful rhythm of night, carrying with it all the textures, scents, and gentle sounds that made up the reality of daily life in those distant times when cleanliness was indeed a luxury, and comfort was measured by different, simpler standards than our own.